what we're going to be seeing. But why don't you start us off with our introductions here for game one?
I'd love to. Spawning down in the lower left-hand position of Frost, we have got the blue Zerg player representing Team Liquid, none other than Snute. And his opponent, up to the top left, the red Protoss representing Team Evil Geniuses, we have HuK. So, nice early game, first game of this best of 9 of course here. I'm Madals, with me is Liaison. And with $400 on the line, this is certainly going to be a hard-fought game and hard-fought series.
Yeah, this is something that I would honestly expect both players to have at least put some time into. And honestly, I might give the slight edge in this to Snute, just because of the fact that HuK has just come from a wild weekend out west with not only MLG Anaheim, but also the Red Bull Battlegrounds North America, and playing in all of that, preparing for the opponents he was going to be seeing there, whereas Snute has kind of been sitting back, and he had himself a relatively easy weekend when all is said and done.
It's going to be a lot of fun, definitely, to see what happens. Of course, MLG was very, very fun, so hope everyone got to check that out. In terms of opening, Snute is actually going to be opening with a spawning pool first here, so this is completely normal. Nothing too crazy there. Meanwhile, HuK seems to be going for a Nexus first opening, playing this very greedy on Frost.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, Snute is someone who has gone with the 15 pool over any sort of hatch first play pretty much every single game in ZVP or PvZ, as I guess he sees it, just because he then has a much easier time dealing with any of those cannon rushes or anything like that that we see a lot of the time from Protoss players. And obviously HuK not going with that as he lays down the gateway after the Nexus, but it's his decision, his way of making life easier for him in the early game and getting him towards that mid to late game.
So in terms of this mid to late game, a lot of people, I know in the Team Liquid thread and stuff like that, have been expecting a heavy amount of gateway pressure to be coming in from HuK. Do you reckon this is the sort of map we could be seeing that sort of fun come in from Liaison?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I mean, if you look at kind of how many choke points there are around, not only kind of the logical third Snute will take just east of his main, but also by the natural there, it's kind of very force field friendly if you look at it. And he's taking both of his gases now, and he's a player as well who early on in Heart of the Swarm and Wings of Liberty especially, he was lauded for his control, and a lot of that comes on the Protoss side with gateway units.
Now, HuK, as you said, has taken those two gases early, but Snute has got some great scouting information, thanks to the Overlord being in the main base, knows that's coming down, knows that it was a Nexus first. Meanwhile, HuK, he's just sent a probe in, he's got a good amount of vision and is moving down to scout the timing of that third base from Snute, which is not particularly early, not particularly late either, just all around the normal times that he'd want to be getting that up against a Nexus first.
Yeah, and this third base here for Snute is going to set him up really nicely going into the rest of the game here. He's just now putting himself back into that gas here, getting enough for possibly metabolic booster. A lot of Zergs at this point are kind of skipping that and going right into Roach Hydra play if that's where Snute wants to go. I'm really interested to see where he takes it, and if, you know, we can see possibly these spawning positions that we talked about earlier having an effect on where this game goes.
Now, Snute, of course, he's keeping this Overlord around and nearby, but it's having to back out due to the fact that the first Stalker is on the field, so just wants to make sure that stays alive. Due to these spawn locations, that Overlord would have quite a tough time getting back into the main base without being picked off. And because Snute doesn't have an Overlord over to the right of the main, it will make it more challenging to get this early scouting information. However, HuK is going to be mixing up what potentially a lot of his critics have been saying, that it's going to be all two base plays as he takes a third nice and early.
Yeah, this is a very early third here from HuK, and that's largely in part to getting this early forge here. I'm sure that after the second pylon comes down, and HuK's probably, yeah, he's just going to lay down a couple of cannons here and really try to play defensive. If Snute does not scout this and is not aware that his opponent is actually on even bases with him, he could find himself in a troubling situation moving forward.
Snute, he's getting down the Roach Warren, but as you said, he hasn't yet scouted down that third base. And to be honest, it's unlikely he's going to check for it that early. He's seen that the Forge was researching something. He knows that, obviously, HuK is a player who will quite often go for two-base aggression. But if he doesn't see this third anytime soon, all of the responses that Snute is currently gunning towards, all of his current concerns, are going to be baseless.
And you know what I'm honestly hoping for a little bit here from HuK? There's been recently kind of a flux of, and it doesn't look like this is where he's going right now, but of putting down this Nexus, having your opponent scout it, fake it, and then go into a huge gateway timing. He is getting 4 more gateways right now, but with the extra gases coming down on top of it, I don't know if that's exactly what we're going to be seeing. He is producing probes from that third base, so it does look like this is going to be for some sort of economic opener, but Snute now is the one who's got 9 roaches, a 10th one popping out, and a ton of lings coming out here.
Now, I'm trying to take a look at what Snute has seen to really insinuate that he wants to go in here. He hasn't scouted in the main base anytime soon, so it's not like he's not seen anything in order to basically justify this big push. He's just going for it somewhat boldly, somewhat bravely, sending the lings up to check to see if that third's there, and is going to be happy to see that, yes, it is. Moving in with the roaches. This is a lot of army for Snute in this first game of the series.
There's a ton of lings streaming in here. The sentry is forced to come back to the safety of the cybernetics core forge wall. The cannon gets focused down. Probes get pulled off the line, but the speedlings are coming in here. They're tearing every probe apart in the middle of the line. Photon overcharge comes down from the mothership core, but this Nexus does not look like it's going to survive as roaches and lings continue to power through.
HuK was incredibly greedy with this third Nexus. It went down very early, and by not being able to keep it, he's got himself on the back foot. Snute going for blood very early on, showing that he's not all about those really long swarm host games every single match. Instead, putting on this pressure early, behind it adding in the lair, adding in some additional gases, but still producing more roaches.
And I think when he first went for this attack, his intention was not to win the game here, but he's quickly realizing that he just might be able to. He does get the layer behind it. The last 3 gases, he takes down that +2 researching, which is absolutely spectacular for him as he's lacking on the upgrades himself at the moment. He's minimizing, well, HuK's ability to get those upgrades. Blink is on the way out, and a Robo does come down in response to all the roaches we've seen here, but Snute, well, he's done a pretty decent amount of damage here. HuK isn't down and out, but he's kind of in an awkward spot here trying to reestablish this third base.
It's going to be always a tough place to be, because this third was integral to HuK's kind of mid-game strategy. His early game opening was all about establishing this base really early on, and Snute just put his foot in it. And now HuK really only had 2 choices, to try and retake it or to go for a 2 base off the back, both of which aren't ideal options.
And now we see the infestation pit coming down here for Snute. Interested by this choice here. Madals, do you think this is for swarm hosts possibly?
Potentially it could be. Of course, Snute is a player who is very fond of swarm hosts. We don't see any melee attack upgrades or anything like that, which may insinuate that he was heading towards, say, ultra tech. But Snute is in a really good spot here. Look at the supplies, 120 to 94. HuK really needs to hold this third base, if nothing else, so he's got the Photon Overcharge there.
He's got the photon overcharge, and he's got a nice little wall at his natural as well. And this distance and this high ground that you can kind of hold between your natural and your third from HuK's perspective, it actually makes it a little bit easier for him. And with, well, what now is 14 sentries here in the mix in this army, with someone who's generally, you know, prides themselves on control like HuK does, he should be in a pretty good spot against these roaches here to just try and reestablish his base and get himself moving here. But it is swarm hosts coming out, enduring locusts being researched. And these swarm hosts, you know, this is a rare situation, at least for me, Madals, where we might be seeing these swarm hosts used aggressively to overwhelm the opponent.
And the trouble is for HuK, he doesn't really have a response to those swarm hosts long term. The robotics bay just now begun, but it's quite exposed out the front. For now, at least, HuK is completely reliant on gateway units and immortals, and that's not going to make it easy to stop the never-ending tide of locusts that are going to start heading his way.
But we are, it seems, going to have to see, well, Snute's multitasking tasked a little bit here as a Warp Prism comes out, timed out with that Dark Shrine finishing up in the back of the base. The Robo Bay for Colossus comes down, and even a second robotics facility coming down too. So he's going to want to, it looks like he's scouted the swarm host. He's trying to get into that huge Colossus switch, and the DTs, well, they're meant to really keep Snute back, keep him all over the place, but he's got spore crawlers in every mineral line, and he is not trying to find himself in a position where that's going to be too problematic for him.
HuK is moving forward. He's just trying to force back creep spread, which is something that Snute is very, very strong with. And that's a smart move, but these stalkers are going to get caught out of position as some lings flood round the back, going to intercept, going to get the wraparound. But with the sentries, and there is a heck of a lot of them there, Snute decides to just back on out. He's bought himself some more safety, some more time to just ever increase that swarm host count.
Yeah, and HuK's done a really nice job of not recklessly using force fields, despite the fact that he has all of these sentries, knowing that his stalkers had the numbers there and that, well, Snute wasn't going to go for a surround there anyway. There are zealots warped in the back of the base here for Snute. Lings kind of butting their heads into them. A couple of them do fall with Queen support behind it as the stalkers pressure that third base, but swarm hosts and some roaches push that back as well. And well, Snoot's supply advantage continues to grow here. I just don't think there are going to be enough Colossi out on the map here, Madals, to help him deal with what's going to be close to 20 swarm hosts right now.
One Colossus is all that stands between these locusts and just sieging up HuK's third base, and that's ultimately what Snute is looking for. A couple of stalkers get caught out of position here. They have to blink away, but with this choke using the rocks, those sentries could force field off for a hell of a long time. So ultimately, HuK can buy himself a little bit more time, but he's certainly not buying himself time in a comfortable place.
Oh, and a couple swarm hosts pick off a few sentries here, which is a very nice victory for Snute. Any damage he can get done with those swarm hosts is nice, but he knows right now that there's nothing HuK can really do as far as move out, but he does have DTs and some zealots down at this third base here. It looks like it's almost sure to fall as the swarm hosts continue to work here, but the DTs, there's nothing to scout for him here. Hatchery below 200 hit points. Oh, here comes the Overseer. Is it going to fall? Oh, it survives. Wow, just barely the Overseers show up in time.
That was a really close call for Snute. If he'd lost that base, it wasn't the end of the world. Swarm hosts are a very cost-efficient army, and he could just keep on sending these locusts in. But what HuK has done is, again, bought himself more time. Now a decent number of Colossi, 4 of them on the field, a good number of hallucinated Archons as well, just going to add into that confusion. And HuK, quite wisely, pushing around the side into the tighter chokes where he's going to be able to funnel those locusts and units in, allowing the Colossus to get their big splash damage down.
Yeah, it's a really nice play here from HuK. Hallucinating the Archons as well is a nice touch, and these, well, locusts are actually taking them down. This base looks like it's going to be pretty much sacrificed here for Snute, and, well, HuK is working himself back in, and with that, well, StarCraft-famed Protoss Death Ball here, 2-2 is finishing for Snute, which will be very nice for him, but with 2 Colossi coming out at a time, the Vipers just now showing up to the party. Snute, well, he's going for the counterattack.
And this counterattack is going to get completely, basically, through, because there's nothing here to defend. HuK is out of position with this, and while his Mothership Core does have enough energy for a mass recall, it is not being used. This is meaning that HuK has to come in from the south side to get to his own base. A Colossus getting very low, will escape up into the high ground, and it's little wins like that that HuK is really going to be looking for.
Yeah, HuK able to save the Colossus is nice. The Zealots down at the bottom base again are wreaking havoc over here. Vipers, well, they're just going to have to stand around and watch as the Lings try to clean this up, but now this hatchery will fall, despite the fact that it had regenerated most of its health with the help of a few transfuses as well. And, well, now HuK feeling very confident. He's pretty much even in supply. He's actually ahead in workers because of all the drones that he's killed, killing off those 2 bases, and he's marching forward, establishing a 4th base. He's in the driver's seat.
There's still 29 swarm hosts though, and with the Vipers now on the field, the Abducts are going to be the fear. As we saw there, a Colossus gets quickly snatched back, taken down by the Locusts, and this is the sort of play that Snute wants to be gunning for now. He wants to force HuK to move into his ground, get into range of those Abducts, and ultimately just try and whittle down this army.
Yeah, HuK is desperately trying to get himself into that Templar transition. Storm coming out right now, being chrono boosted out. More warp prisms coming out as well, so he's really looking to be all over the map. And he's going to need not only the storms, but those all-important feedbacks on the locusts, or on the Vipers, excuse me, to keep his Colossi out of range of the locusts.
And this is really where late game ZVP excels, because those feedbacks, those abducts, the spellcasters can make or break any engagement for both of these 2 players now. And a lot of the pressure, I'd actually say, comes on HuK. He's got to make sure he hits those feedbacks, as you said, Liaison. Because if he doesn't, well, his big, powerful units that are essential to deal with those locusts, the Colossus, can quickly get taken down.
And it's interesting, he's actually not making any more Colossus at this point. He's at 4. And kind of what you alluded to earlier, I'm not sure if that's enough here. I mean, storms will help him push through, but you got to think he would be happier with a couple more Colossi in the mix here.
Waiting to see what Snute plans to do on this left-hand side now. Pushing through quite a tight choke means that the Colossi can splash through very easily, and I think quite wisely, Snute pulling back there, just reburrowing up these swarm hosts at his 4th base, but he's getting dropped in the main yet again.
Yeah, the main base looks like it's being harassed quite a bit by the Zealots. The third base has been cleaned up, but these Zealots are going to take down what amounts to a macro hatch and an evolution chamber, the one that's not researching here. And he's trying to force Snoot's army back as HuK pushes back towards that fourth base. But those swarm hosts are going to continue to kind of help out the Zerg player here. This Queen's going to fall, and there's really no answer right now on the main base for these Zealots. These Vipers are coming in, but it seems like Snoot's not reacting to this. He's underestimating it.
Snute, the trouble for him now is he's on 4 bases, which isn't necessarily a problem if it wasn't also for the fact that HuK is now up a lot in the probe count. He's also on 4 bases, and his standing army is doing a great job of continually trading. If we look at the resources lost, only about 2,000 more for HuK, which 22 minutes into the game isn't that substantial.
Yeah, and he's moving out across the map here, trying to still do something, approaching from all of these different angles. The Warp Prism escapes and tries to warp in some more, but there's just units all over the place right now for HuK. He's looking for additional bases. He's going to be pretty comfortable knowing that Snute is stuck on these 4 bases because, well, he's on 4 bases here as well.
The tough decision is going to come from HuK on, while this harassment is great, how does he actually engage into those swarm hosts? There is still 38 of them on the field liaison. That is an incredibly high number, a ridiculous count of locusts every wave, and pushing into that, even with a lot of colossi, a lot of storms, is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah, he's going to need to do basically what he's doing right now, but he's using a lot of storms to take down what amounts to only a few or a very small percentage of these locusts. But look at this, he's almost just starving Snute out here. Snute does still have a bank, but he is really pushing forward here. Oh, the Templar, he's got to watch out for those, almost misrallying them out into the locust fire. But, really nice pulls on 2 colossi. That is huge here for Snute. HuK's supply dips down to 126, 61 army supply.
That was a big loss for HuK. Still 3 colossi are on the field, but losing those early on is going to be tough. In the main base though, the Zealots are getting warped in yet again with the aid of a couple of Dark Templar, trying to just pick away at any important structures they hope to be able to find. But the difference is, Snute is now able to pay a lot more attention to dealing with this, because the main army has been thwarted in its attempt pushing in down to this right, despite actually getting the hatchery, which is probably the biggest prize.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the army right now, for HuK, he's got 3 Colossi, 9 Sentries, 6 Templar, and a few other units sprinkled in here and there. It's not enough to deal with the number you talked about before, which is now 35 Swarm Hosts to go with 3 Vipers. I mean, he needs to sit back and wait, but it seems like Snute is the one who's perfectly content slow pushing his Swarm Hosts up and really pressuring this 4th base. If the 4th base falls, HuK is in trouble.
Looking at upgrades and where things are sitting at the moment, we've got 3-1 for HuK's ground army with +1 shields, whereas Snute is happily sitting on 3-2. That means these locusts are going to be hitting really hard, and that's something that HuK has to be aware of. Any form of miscontrol by him is going to cause him a little bit of pain in terms of his army count. But, as you rightly said, Snute is only on 3 bases at the moment. His natural is pretty much mined out. His bank is hurting.
Yeah, he needs to take another base here sometime soon. HuK kind of feeling the same way as he pushes off towards the right end of the map on the top side, looking to take another base. And, well, Snute doesn't seem like that's the game plan he wants to go for. He just wants to push in. This Warp Prism, well, it's going to get taken down relatively quickly here. But look at all these locusts coming in towards this base. Snute has found himself a sweet spot, and HuK pushing around the other side. Are they setting up for a base trade here?
Well, HuK is certainly going for it. He can't get back in order to defend that base anytime soon, so he actually goes for the kill, looking to try and get that 3rd hatchery, one of the final mining bases that Snute had available, will be successful in picking it off, but more importantly, his own 4th is yet to die, not to mention the fact his 5th to the top right has already finished up.
These Swarm Hosts doing so much damage once they finally got in range there for Snute. Another round coming in. Looks like they will try to finally pick off that base, but with the Colossi coming in, the Immortals, the Archons, all these AoE intensive units here for the Protoss, well, HuK's able to push it back and for now protect his base.
HuK is playing an amazing game right here, and it's all down to the fact that he isn't rushing anything. He's not being too crazy. And think, all of this was off the back of an incredibly fast 3rd Nexus, which he actually lost to pressure from Snute.
Yeah, and now you look at the Colossi count. He's got 7 on the field, an 8th one on the way as well, with more High Templar coming out, some Archons mixed in, couple sentries for force fields. You gotta like his chances here against that huge swarm host count that we talked about before, and he actually forces the unburrow here, and they're moving in. But is this base going to go down? It is going to fall. The 4th base for HuK goes down. His 5th on the top right is established. However, it's not as huge of a deal as well Snute might think it is at the moment. But oh, huge picks on those Colossi. They fall. The Colossus count down to 5, and again, HuK sent back.
The trouble for HuK is while he does have this base to the top right now, look at the worker count. He's down to only 45 probes. A couple of minutes ago, he was up quite substantially in that worker count, giving him a great economy. He had a decentish bank, but due to losing those Colossi, due to losing that base and the probes, suddenly his bank isn't looking as healthy as it was before. Whereas Snute, he's slowly catching back up. He's still got a pretty much maxed out army and over 1,000 minerals and gas in the bank.
And this army pushing forward again, taking down the space. HuK finding really nice cost-efficient opportunities to engage, whereas it seems like Snute is kind of stuck pushing up the front towards that 4th base. These Lings are coming around the map. It looks like they will finally find what is now the 5th base of HuK, with that 4th being reestablished, but Zealots are there, a Dark Templar for good measure, as well as a couple of cannons, and maybe the Lings aren't going to find it. They're just hanging out on the right side of the map right now, but Snute looking for a different angle to engage. It's been back and forth for him.
Considering we're approaching the 30-minute mark in this game, things are really getting tense. HuK is giving Snute an amazing run for his money, but overall I still think at the moment Snute is in the better spot. He's got those 38 swarm hosts, and they're just proving to be this wall that HuK is unable to push through. And while he's doing a fantastic job of harassing, dropping, picking off bases on the fringes of Snute's army away from those swarm hosts, at some point he's gonna have to go head on, even if that's forced by Snute. And there, HuK may have more difficulties.
Yeah, Snute's still, I agree with you. He's got an army that's very difficult to engage, and you can see HuK wants nothing to do with that. He really does not want to engage this army head on, and that's why he keeps dipping around to the left side. It seems like Snute has pretty much given up on reestablishing that base, and he hasn't taken any bases anywhere else, but somehow, how does he still have this bank? He's been maxed for a while. I guess his cost efficiency, he's been losing just locusts pretty much, so he's been keeping his units alive.
That cost efficiency really is where the trades are going nicely for Snute and why he's been able to generate this bank. Nearly 30,000 resources, almost double that lost by HuK. But HuK now pushes through. He's going to likely lose his own 5th base, which he's re-establishing in the 4th from the next wave of Locusts, but he's moving in towards the natural base now, and Snute is not in a position to be able to defend this. The Swarm Hosts trying to get back to get the defense, but with the Mothership Core, HuK can just recall out.
Yeah, HuK found himself a sweet spot here. He pushes and takes down a couple of extra bases and would expect a recall here. Really nice Viper pulls there on 3 Colossi. Double Time Warp goes down, but that's not going to do a heck of a lot. And now HuK suddenly is trapped in the main base as his Mothership Core used all of its energy to put down those Time Warps.
Quite an interesting decision to use those Time Warps, but the Hive falling. Now, of course, the Evolution Chamber, the Infestation Pit, the Rotor One, all up for grabs. And there's still the 2 Colossi, still a good number of Archons. And with that Hive and natural base falling, Snute is only on 1 hatch.
But the question kind of remains is once HuK's army here, which should inevitably fall, well, how in the world is he going to remake it in time? There are still, as we've talked about, 36 Swarm Hosts on the map.
I think the bigger issue is, will this army fall? Because
that's true.
The force field can just hold that ramp pretty much indefinitely. Obviously, the Colossi can take out the choke, but the more pressing issue for HuK is what if Snute just decides to go and kill him? He can't get out of there.
Yeah, and he's continuing to push with Swarm Hosts towards that 4th base. Looks like he will eventually take that down in regards to Snute here. He's got, HuK has Zealots canceling yet another base here. And again, both players just so back and forth here. The big story, though, is, well, that base for HuK has been spotted in the top right by Snute, but he hasn't really found the moment yet to go and try and do anything about it. Stalker's down by this 3rd base, doing a nice job of staying mobile, trying to get a couple of worker kills here and there. Snute down to 19 Harvesters, but HuK, he's only at 29.
This is a really interesting spot because, as it stands, Snute is trying to establish up more bases, but he's still got a couple of buildings, and while he was able to take out the 5th of HuK, Snute is just busy turtling up. He's like, well, I've got your army pinned in a bit of a corner. That Mothership Core eventually will be able to recall it out. But you can't end this. I'm just going to take out your expansions while you're trapped there, and you don't have a say in it.
Yeah, I think Snoot's doing a really nice job here, pushing patiently with his Swarm Host into that base up at the top right. He'll eventually, well, push forward despite the fact that there's that one Dark Templar there. These Stalkers getting taken down in the middle of the map by a few Locusts, and at the end of the day, Snoot kind of has, you can tell, a very good sense of how to play out a PvZ, a longer PvZ with Swarm Hosts and how to really push his advantages forward, knowing that despite the fact that, you know, he might lose a couple bases here and there, but he can push patiently, and there's nothing HuK can really do if he pushes this, you know, kind of all over the place, and he's even taking bases on HuK's side of the map.
HuK is still staying in this game though. He's got a decent-ish size army. He's only, okay, he's down by a fair chunk of supply, 50 army supply specifically. But Snute, his army is not as big as it was before. He's still got those 36 Swarm Hosts though, and as we've said all throughout this game since they really got out on the field, is HuK is going to have such difficulty engaging them directly.
Yeah, and now HuK's army is pretty much trapped in that base at the top right. He's actually going to evacuate, it seems, his probes. There are a couple Colossi. One of them does fall. The second one getting very low, and yeah, will survive, just barely 7 hit points left. But you kind of see the map is filled with Zerg right now. Really nice storms onto those Swarm Hosts, but the Locusts do end up coming out, and all those Swarm Hosts do survive here. So it seems like Snute pushing through, and well, 37 minutes in, he's finally gotten himself that pretty noticeable advantage in this one.
The creep spread as well is really good for Snute. He's got good control all over the map, giving him that enhanced mobility, just so he can take out these bases left or right, wherever they come from. The Colossi now going down, and that is going to hurt for HuK, who's under 50 supply. And with those Colossi being abducted, things really not looking so great for the Evil Genius's player.
Yeah, and I think this has gone the way, you know, once the end result, it's gone the way a lot of people may have predicted. Just if these games in this series go longer, the longer they go almost, the more Snute will have an advantage, and we're kind of seeing that here in this game. But this isn't anything to say that HuK doesn't have an opportunity to push through in the next game. And you know, forgive me if I'm talking about the next game already, but with the supply 100 difference here from 142 for Snute, 44 for HuK, it seems like we'll be moving into game number 2 shortly.
I think the thing is that this game has really shown that HuK can give Snute an incredibly close run for his money. There was a lot of back and forths, and it was really, really difficult for Snute quite a lot of the time to successfully defend against that harassment. Hell, he's only got one base really at the moment, and just trying to remake the other ones as it stands. That base race was ever so close to being very, very good for HuK.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and HuK, credit him for going for that kind of econ cheese, if you want to call it that very aggressive early third base. Snute, though, once he knew it was coming after that Roach play, that he was able to kill it and kind of negate the fact that that base was there, he went very quickly into Swarm Hosts, which I think are a great response to that, to slow the game down and kind of allow him to push back into an advantageous position.
The second robotics facility just died there, and the reason I'm pointing that out is even if there was money for it, HuK now can't produce any more Colossi. And without any Colossus, engaging 36 Swarm Hosts isn't really a thing you can do.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I'm not sure what HuK is hoping to accomplish here. Maybe he's just trying to force Snute to play a little bit longer here, but there's not much he can do. He's trying to send some DTs around, but I mean, let's be honest here, Madals.
It's not looking too good for HuK. One thing I did want to point out from this game that was actually really important is the way Snute was utilizing those Swarm Hosts was incredibly cool. At no point was he just kind of getting the big clump of 38 of them, or 36, and just sitting there as a group and rallying across. He had many different kind of squads of Swarm Hosts that were going all over the map, some defensive, some offensive. And that really gave him a lot of mobility with what is, in theory, a very immobile army.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and I think this is a lot of the kind of play that some of the StarCraft 2 is. There's the GG. Snute takes game number 1 of our best of 9 series, but you know, I think that's what a lot of the kind of StarCraft 2 game makers kind of envisioned when they put the unit into the game, and credit Snute for being creative with it.